There was a Roman emperor who ruled the most powerful empire on earth, and every single morning, before he put on his crown, he reminded himself that he was nothing, not as self-destruction, not as weakness, as armor. And by the time you finish this video, you're going to understand exactly why that habit made him completely untouchable, and how you can use the same psychological trick to stop letting other people's opinions control your entire life. Stay with me here, because what I'm about to share isn't your typical motivational fluff. This goes deep. This rewires something. And if this is the content that actually challenges the way you think, real wisdom, real stories, things that stick with you for days, then hit that subscribe button right now and tap the bell so you never miss a drop. We go deep here every single time. All right, let's get into it. Here's the thing nobody tells you when you're growing up. At some point in your life, probably when you were really young, maybe 7 or 8 years old, someone laughed at you, or someone said something that made you feel small. Maybe it was in class. Maybe it was at lunch. Maybe it was your own family around a dinner table. And in that moment, something shifted inside your brain. A tiny little alarm system got installed. And from that day forward, every time you were about to speak up, every time you were about to take a chance, every time you were about to just be yourself, that alarm would fire, and the voice would say, what are they going to think? What are they going to say? What if they laugh again? That voice, that is the thing we're dismantling today. Because here's what's wild. Most people walk around their entire lives never questioning that voice. They dress for other people. They choose careers for other people. They stay in relationships that don't serve them because leaving would cause other people to talk. They shrink. They dim their own light. They edit every sentence before it comes out of their mouth, and they call it being socially aware. They call it being mature. They call it not wanting drama. But if we're being real with each other right now, and that's what this channel is about, it's fear. Plain and simple. It's the oldest, most exhausting fear a human being can carry, and I want to tell you about a man who figured out the cure. Not a modern self-help guru. Not a podcast host. A man who lived 2,000 years ago, who was beaten, enslaved, had his leg broken by his own master, and who still managed to develop a philosophy of the mind so powerful that Roman emperors kept his writings on their nightstands. His name was Epictetus, and what he discovered about the human mind is so simple, it almost sounds stupid when you first hear it. But give it 10 seconds to land, and it will crack something open inside you. He said this: some things are in our control, and others are not. That's it. That's the whole framework. Sounds almost too obvious, right? But here's where it gets devastating. Because Epictetus wasn't just making an observation, he was drawing a line, a hard, permanent, non-negotiable line. On one side of that line sits everything you control: your thoughts, your choices, your reactions, your effort, your values, your character. On the other side of that line sits everything you do not control: the weather, the economy, the past, other people's actions, and this is the one that hits hardest: what other people think of you. Read that again. What other people think of you is not in your control. It never was. It never will be. And every single second you spend trying to manage, influence, or anxiously obsess over someone else's opinion of you is a second you are pouring into a drain. Gone. Wasted. Burned. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, that's easy to say, but what about my reputation? What about my job? What about my relationships? What about real social consequences that actually affect my life? And those are fair questions, legitimate questions. We're going to get there. But first, I need you to understand the difference between two very different things that most people confuse their entire lives. The difference between social intelligence and social anxiety. Because those two things look almost identical from the outside, but they are completely opposite on the inside. Social intelligence is thinking, how do my actions affect others? How can I communicate clearly? How can I be someone people trust and respect? That's healthy. That's useful. That's wisdom. Social anxiety is thinking, what are they thinking about me right now? Do they like me? Did that thing I said 3 days ago make me look stupid? Am I being judged? Are they talking about me when I leave? That's not wisdom. That's a prison. And the terrifying thing is that most people don't even realize they're locked inside it because they've been in that prison so long the walls feel like home. Here's a story. There was a young man, let's call him Daniel, who was brilliant, genuinely, frighteningly smart. He had ideas that could have built companies. He had a voice that could have moved rooms. But every time he was in a meeting, he'd hold back. He'd let mediocre ideas get approved without challenge because he didn't want to seem arrogant. He'd watch other people get promotions he deserved because he never advocated for himself. He had a folder on his laptop, thousands of pages of writing he'd never shown anyone, because what if people didn't get it? What if they thought he was pretentious? What if they laughed? He spent 15 years like this. 15 years of quiet brilliance slowly being buried alive, and then one day his mentor, an older man who'd watched all of this with growing frustration, sat him down and said something that changed everything. He said, "Daniel, you are not protecting yourself from judgment, you are protecting your ego from being tested. And the difference between those two things is the difference between someone who lives and someone who watches." That sentence broke him open, because he realized the voice telling him to stay quiet wasn't protecting him at all. It was protecting a comfortable illusion. The illusion that he might be great as long as he never actually tried. Because the moment you try, the moment you show your real work to the real world, the illusion gets tested. And that's the terrifying part. That's what the anxiety is actually guarding. Not you. The illusion. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. There's a concept in psychology called the spotlight effect, and it's one of the most liberating pieces of research I've ever come across. Studies have shown, repeatedly, that human beings dramatically overestimate how much other people notice them, think about them, and remember things about them. You trip in public and you think everyone saw it and will remember it forever. Reality, within 30 seconds, 90% of those people have already moved on to thinking about their own problems, their own insecurities, their own embarrassing moments. Because here's the thing that nobody's anxiety ever wants to admit: everyone is the main character of their own story. And in their story, you are barely a background extra. The person you're terrified of judging you. They're at home worried about whether they said something weird at dinner. The coworker you think is silently critiquing your every move. They're in their car replaying an argument from 2 weeks ago. The crowd you imagine watching and evaluating you. They're each individually drowning in their own heads. Nobody has as much mental bandwidth to judge you as you think. That's not pessimism about human connection. That's liberation, because it means the courtroom you've been standing in your entire life, terrified of the verdict, it was always empty. You were the only one showing up to the trial. And this is where Marcus Aurelius comes back in, because Marcus wasn't just a philosopher. He was an emperor. He had real power, real enemies, real public scrutiny at a level most of us will never experience. People wrote hit pieces about him, senators plotted against him, generals questioned his decisions, and his response documented in his private journal, a journal he never intended anyone to read, which is what makes it so raw and so real. His response was this: "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He didn't become emperor and then find peace. He practiced finding peace so that being emperor wouldn't destroy him. Every morning he'd sit with his thoughts and remind himself what was in his control and what wasn't. He'd deliberately meditate on the fact that other people's opinions, even the opinions of powerful, dangerous people, were outside his circle of control, and therefore not worth the energy of anxiety, worth understanding.
Yes.
Worth responding to strategically sometimes, but worth lying awake at night consumed by. Never. That's not indifference. Let me be clear about that, because I think a lot of people here stop caring what people think and they interpret it as be a sociopath. That's not what this is. Stoicism isn't about shutting off your emotions. It's about not being enslaved by them. It's about being able to feel something, feel the sting of criticism, feel the awkwardness of a social moment, and then consciously choose your response instead of just reactively drowning in it. Here's the real practice, and I want you to actually try this because this is where the theory becomes a tool. Next time you feel that familiar anxiety, that tightening in your chest before you speak, that obsessive replaying of something you said, that shrinking feeling before you take a risk, I want you to ask yourself one question, just one. And the question is this within my control? Is what they think of me within my control? No? So it moves to the other side of the line. Is how I show up, what I say, how much effort I put in, is that within my control? Yes. So that gets my full attention. It sounds mechanical when I describe it like that. But the people who practice this really practice it, not just read about it and nod. They describe it as the most freeing experience of their adult lives. Because you're not trying to force yourself to not care. You're redirecting your caring. Instead of spending that emotional energy on a thing you cannot change, what someone thinks about you, you spend it on a thing you absolutely can change, who you actually are and how you actually show up. And here's the twist that most people don't see coming. When you do this, when you genuinely stop performing for the audience in your head and start actually living, you become more magnetic, not less. People are drawn to those who aren't desperate for approval. Have you ever noticed that? There's a certain kind of person, you've met them, who just seems completely at home in their own skin. They're not loud, they're not arrogant, they're just settled. And everyone in the room can feel it. That settledness is attractive. Not because they're trying to be attractive, but because the absence of neediness creates a kind of calm that other people want to be near. The person who's constantly seeking validation, constantly looking around to see if people are laughing, constantly adjusting what they say based on the reaction, that desperation is visible. People can feel it like a signal. And ironically, it makes the validation you're seeking harder to get. But the person who has done the internal work, who has drawn the line between what they control and what they don't, who has stopped making other people's judgments the center of their universe, that person walks into a room and changes the temperature of it. Now, I want to talk about the specific thing that keeps most people stuck. Because understanding the philosophy is one thing, but there's a practical block that shows up again and again that we need to address directly. And that block has a name. It's called rejection sensitivity, and it's especially brutal for anyone who grew up in an environment, family, school, culture, where love felt conditional, where approval felt like it had to be earned, where the wrong move meant losing connection, losing safety, losing belonging. If that was your environment, and for a lot of people watching this, it was, then your brain didn't just install a small alarm system, it installed a full security operation, because when you're young and you depend on other people for your actual survival, their approval isn't just social preference, it feels like life or death. And your brain, which is a survival machine above all else, encodes that threat response deep. It becomes automatic, it becomes fast, you feel it before you can think about it. But here's what neuroscience tells us, and this is genuinely hopeful. The brain is plastic, it rewires, not instantly, not without effort, but it rewires. Every time you take a social risk and survive, every time you say the thing you were afraid to say, and the world doesn't end, every time you set a boundary and stay standing, you are laying down new neural pathways. You are literally rebuilding the architecture of how your brain processes social threat. You are teaching the alarm system that not every raised eyebrow is a siren. This is slow work. It doesn't happen from one video, but it starts with understanding, and it accelerates with action. Small, deliberate, repeated action. Say the thing in the meeting. Share the creative work. Tell someone a real opinion instead of performing neutrality. Wear the thing that feels like you, not the thing that feels safe. And then sit with the discomfort afterward and notice that you survived, that the catastrophe your brain predicted did not materialize, that the rejection was either much smaller than feared, or it didn't come at all. And even when it does come, even when someone actually does judge you harshly, even when the thing you feared actually happens, you discover something incredible. You discover that you can handle it, that a negative opinion from another person does not delete you, does not break you, does not end the story. Epictetus was enslaved. His master physically broke his leg to prove he could, and according to historical accounts, Epictetus looked at him and said, calmly, "You will break it, not with defiance, with simple clarity," because he had already separated himself from everything outside his control. His leg was outside his control. His mind was not. What his master thought of him was outside his control. Who he chose to be in that moment was not. That's not a story about not feeling pain. He felt the pain. That's a story about refusing to let someone else's cruelty determine the state of your inner world. That's the standard. That's the destination. You don't have to get there tomorrow, but you need to know it exists. You need to know that level of internal freedom is available to you, not just to ancient Stoic philosophers, to you. Right now, in your regular life, with your regular problems, the framework is the same, the practice is the same, the result is the same, and I want to leave you with this. There is a version of you, a version you've maybe caught glimpses of, maybe in moments of flow, maybe when you were alone, maybe when you were so absorbed in something you loved that you forgot to perform. There is a version of you that is completely, entirely, fiercely yourself, not edited, not performing, not shrinking, not waiting for permission. That version of you is not a future achievement. It is not the result of other people finally approving of you. It is the result of you deciding firmly, quietly, and finally that their approval was never the point. The Stoic secret to being unshakable isn't to stop feeling. It isn't to become cold. It isn't to stop caring about people. It's to draw the line. To look at everything you've been pouring your energy into that sits on the wrong side of that line, and to redirect every single drop of that energy toward who you are and what you do. Because that, and only that, is where your actual power lies. Now here's what I want to know from you. And I want you to actually answer this in the comments because I read every single one. Tell me this. What is one situation in your life right now where fear of what someone thinks is holding you back? Just one. Write it out. Because the act of naming it is the first step to dissolving it. There's something powerful that happens when you take a thing that lives in your chest as a vague, anxious feeling and you put actual words to it. It stops being a fog and it becomes a problem, and problems can be solved. And if this video hit different, if something in here cracked something open or gave you a way of thinking about this that you're going to carry with you, send it to someone who needs to hear it. You already know who I'm talking about. That friend who dims themselves for everyone. That person in your life who is brilliant and paralyzed. Send it. That's how this stuff actually spreads, person to person, because someone cared enough to pass it along. And if you're new here and you somehow made it all the way to the end of this video without subscribing, what are you doing? Hit that button right now. This is what we do here. Real ideas, real depth, no fluff, every single upload. The Roman emperor woke up every morning and reminded himself he was nothing, so that nothing could shake him. Now you know why. Go be unshakable.